Hi, everyone, and welcome back for another episode of Malice in the Mitten. I'm your host, Tracy Preston, along with my bestie, Christine Mulligan. Hey, Christine.
Hey, Trace. Hey, everybody. What's going on? What are we getting into today?
Well, are you ready to hear about a good old stagecoach burglar? Because if you are, I got a story for you.
All right, then.
So today's story was researched and written by Rebecca Hieres. So let's dip back in time, shall we? Let's get into it. This is Season 6, Episode 13, Black Bart. Prior to buses, trains, taxis, and Ubers, if a person needed to get from point A to point B and they didn't own a horse, they could utilize the stagecoach for travel. The first stagecoach in Michigan started in 1822, and it ran from Detroit to Mount Clemens weekly. Passage on the stagecoach was just $1, and more stagecoach lines would branch out of Detroit, taking riders to and from Detroit to cities as far away as Ann Arbor, Toledo, Ohio, and by 1833, Chicago, Illinois. The year of 1853 saw the addition of a route to the newly appointed state capital of Lansing. By 1856, the state had 11 dedicated stagecoach runs. Along the routes, taverns popped up where the stagecoach would stop for the night to rest the horses and passengers would get food and a bed. Walker Tavern on the route between Detroit and Chicago offered a meal of baked beans, cornbread, and pickles for just a quarter. Plates were often nailed to the tables to prevent theft, and sometimes they were not washed between use. Another quarter would get you a bed to share with your fellow travelers. Body odors and oftentimes lice from past travelers were lying in wait. Men and women often slept in the same cramped room, just separated by a curtain down the room's middle. Men would be on one side and women on the other. The trip from Detroit to Chicago would take 5 days by stagecoach. The events at Walker's Tavern would be repeated at each night's stop. Sometimes the roads were too muddy to carry the stagecoach loaded with passengers, so the passengers would have to get out and walk alongside it. It was not a luxury way to travel by any means for the faint of heart, but passengers were not the only things to travel via stagecoach. Mail was carried from town to town, and cash for payroll was delivered for paydays via stagecoaches. Even with the advent of the car and increased train travel, Michigan still had 4 stagecoaches running as late as 1927.
It was like the Wild Wild West bus.
I know. Yeah. And how about, hey, everybody get out. We can't move. We're stuck in the mud. So now you got to walk through the mud?
Yeah. Hey, everybody get in and ride with the lice and the bugs and the cooties. It sounds great.
I know. But it was...
The whole thing just sounds so bad to me.
I know. Could you imagine how stinky? Stank.
No, I don't even want to. You just put a knot in my throat.
You will not be, wanting to eat something at this moment, I'm sure.
I'm too delicate for the past. I'm grateful for technology and upgrades.
You're like, thank the gods you were not born in the 1800s.
I wouldn't do well. No. Nope. Too many bugs. Too many lice. No, too much stage.
I couldn't do it. Oh, God, could you imagine getting one of those beds and it being all stinky and nasty? Oh.
No, let's get out of the grossness and into the murder already, Trace. Come on. Look at me. I'm asking for the murder and the gruesome and the malice instead of the stanky and the buggy and the lacey. Okay?
Okay.
I don't want it.
All right, let's get on with the story. All right, so In part due to the completion of the Erie Canal in 1825, Michigan's population increased by 600% between the years of 1830 and 1840, bringing people from all walks of life. Land was selling for, get this, $1.25 an acre, which in today's money would roughly be about $32.
I do miss out on that. I would like to pop back into the past, buy a few thousand acres, and then pop back into the future and own half the country. You know what I'm saying?
I do miss money bags. Wouldn't that be sweet?
It sounds like a great idea. That's what I'm doing with the first time traveling. That's what's happening.
I'm with you. Let's do it. People were so eager to settle here in Michigan. Shopkeepers, farmers, and businessmen all came, buying land, clearing it, building towns and villages. Hey, we could have our own village.
I'm going for my whole county. I want a whole county.
We are not
Christine's County. CC's.
It's CC's.
Christine's County. Yeah, something quirky like that.
And then my county will be right next to yours.
Tracy's Triangles. Yeah. I don't know. I'm not good with coming up with names on the fly. But yeah, sounds good.
Okay. Tracy's Triangle next to CC's. I love it. All right, but along with the people that wanted to prosper legally came the ones that preferred a little more excitement than the law allowed. Stagecoaches would also come to Michigan's Upper Peninsula, where they had a stagecoach line that ran from the city of Houghton all the way down to Chicago. It was along this line that Raymond Holshay called home. Raymond was not of the productive member of society sort. He preferred to make his living by robbing stagecoaches, burglarizing homes and stores, holding up trains, and at least one murder, possibly two. Born in Thoringen, Germany in 1866, he had fled Germany in part to avoid having to enlist in the army at the age of 16. His father was a prosperous farmer, and Holshay also wanted to make his own way. When he arrived in America, he held jobs at lumber mills in Wisconsin and Michigan, where he worked for a short time with no problems. Eventually, Holshay made his home in the town of Marinesco in Gogebic County in Michigan's Upper Peninsula. Soon after his arrival, though, homes began to be burglared. In each case, no evidence was left behind. Gogebic County sits flush on the border with Wisconsin. It is the westernmost county in Upper Michigan. Its largest towns are Ironwood, which today only has a population of 4,900, and Bessemer, the county seat with only 1,750 people. In the 1880s, the populations would have been far fewer. Adept at hiding and an expert woodsman, Holshay would avoid capture easily at first. At the time, penny dreadfuls were a popular type of book. They were cheap, dramatic, and full of swooning women, dastardly villains, and of course, heroes. One such villain was Black Bart. In real life, the original Black Bart was a stagecoach robber in the western states, robbing 28 stagecoaches between 1877 and 1883. Holshay read a penny dreadful about Black Bart and decided that would be a good name for him too. It was claimed in the papers at the time that the reading of the penny dreadfuls helped him to decide his career. At the time of his arrest, the papers would often refer to him as this rather than his given name. Newspapers at the time described him as, quote, a man of slight build, sallow complexion, bronzed by exposure, ears that stuck out, and with a feline manner about him. He said he always carried at least one knife and one gun. He was said to be a man of few words, no proclivity for alcohol, with a general aversion to trouble. Well, unless you crossed him. In 1884, Holsey was working for the Lakeshore and Western Railroad in Wisconsin. The men had not been paid for some time due to the buyout of another company by Lakeshore and Western, and when the men finally were paid, they received large amounts of back pay. An unarmed man was paid the sum of $400, which would be $12,996 in today's money, so that's a good chunk of money. The man was seen afterward. The man's murdered body, minus the money, was found in the woods along the road leading to Stiles, and Holsey had left town for Montana. He would have been about 17 years old and was never charged with the crime. In April of 1889, Holsey, back in Michigan, held up a stagecoach in Wisconsin traveling between Antigo and Shawano. With a red handkerchief tied over his face, he shot the horse pulling the stagecoach and, at gun and knife point, searched the passengers. He held the driver at gunpoint while he cut the mail sacks with his knife. This attempt would garner him nothing, but he didn't give up. His next attempt at stagecoach robbery netted him a mail pouch with several $100s and an additional $50 from the passengers. Then he pulled a triple hitter. First, he robbed the stagecoach, netting him the mail pouch with an undisclosed amount of money and $20 from passengers. Just an hour later, he robbed the Milwaukee and Northern train. He then traveled to the town of Wisconsin and Bondule and robbed the general store. Putting a gun in the shopkeeper's face, he would demand all that the man had on him. He would get $80, a gold watch, and a gold chain from the store robbery. On May 9th, the Milwaukee and Northern train was parked in the town of Pike. Climbing aboard, he handed his ticket to the conductor, watching as he entered the baggage car. Once the train started moving and he was sure the conductor was gone, he walked to the last car of the train and found the brakeman. With his gun in the man's back, he forced him to walk in front of him, back toward the front of the train. On the way, he stopped at each passenger, demanding valuables and money. As the train slowed down near Ellis Junction, he jumped off and escaped into the woods. Holsey would next show up 100 miles away in the town of Sherwood. He had walked the entire way as he was afraid of horses. There, he robbed another store, and before the police arrived, he would disappear again. On the night of August 7th, he boarded a train on the Wisconsin Central Railway. Approaching the sleeping conductor, he stole his watch and $100 from the sleeping passengers, along with some more watches. Pulling the bell rope to signal the engineer to stop, he jumped off the train as it slowed down and again disappeared into the night. In between travel to Wisconsin to rob trains and stagecoaches there, he would waylay people in the woods to Gogebec County and rob them of their valuables, along with continuing to rob houses. His robberies of travelers were so well known that stagecoaches would insist on heavily armed guards and others would carry weapons. People became afraid to travel in that part of the state. Well, I don't blame them. Everyone went everywhere as well armed as they could, out of fear of encountering Holsey. Shopkeepers and homeowners still feared him. Once on his way out of town, he burglared the home of a judge. It is rumored he was so feared, he would walk into lumber camps, steal some food, and leave with nobody raising a hand to stop him. In less than 5 months, the following bounties would be put on his head: Wisconsin Central Railway, $1,000, Lakeshore and Western, $1,000. Miscellaneous smaller rewards of $500 each would also be offered. The U.S. government would place a bounty on his head. Eventually, the bounties would total over $3,500. For a young man, he wasn't headed in a good direction.
Can I just say, with all of these towns and counties and names that you've been naming, CC Square and Tracy's Triangle doesn't sound like bad names anymore. At least they're easy to say.
Right. Yeah, you're like, you know what? Those are great names.
CC Square. Tracy's Triangle.
CC Square and Tracy's Triangle. It doesn't get any better.
Yeah. Anyway, this guy was like a little mini Michigan Cowboys and Indians Westerny.
Yeah,
I love it. I'm just saying. I can't think of any of the old stagecoach train robbers, the famous ones, but I know they're out there. I can't think of any of their names right now. But this is Michigan's like local yokel nutcakes.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
He's like the original Bandito.
Yeah. Okay,
I'm
sorry. Go ahead. I was just listening, and I was like, all of these names are such a struggle. Even this guy's first name is a struggle.
Yeah, it is.
It's a lot. It's a lot for you. I'm sorry.
It is a lot, and I think I'm doing pretty good with the names today.
You are doing good. This is just a lot. Don't ask me. No quizzes after this.
No quizzes. I think Becky's trying to throw me for a freaking loop. Let's see if she can say this.
I think that the writer is messing with you. I'm just saying.
Right.
All right. So all of these rewards are out for him. So now what happens?
All right. So Lake Gojebek is a beautiful lake in Michigan's Upper Peninsula, a popular vacation spot in the 1880s where people from as far away as Chicago came to relax. A beautiful resort sat on its shores for people to stay. Adolph Fleshbein was a Chicago banker headed to Lake Gojebek on the stagecoach from Gojebek Station. The driver was Theodore DeMuth. They were approximately 3 miles from their destination when Fleshbein was conversing with the other passengers, Donald McArcher, a banker from Minneapolis, Robert Rentoul, a banker from Montreal, Canada, and William Padden from Chicago. The date was August 26, 1889. The day before, Fleshbein had gone fishing with a man named Holshay, a guide at the resort he was staying at. Suddenly, on the tree-darkened roadway, the stagecoach stopped, and the two men heard a voice, quote, "Donate! I'm collecting." Pretending to obey, MacArthur reached into his coat pocket, and instead of pulling out money to give to Holshay, he pulled out a gun, saying, quote,
"All right, here's mine."
And he began to shoot. Although less than 5 feet apart, he missed hitting Holshay, who began to fire back. Firing 2 guns, a .44 and a .38, he hit McArcher in the jaw and leg. Fleshbein, who was standing, was hit in the left thigh with a bullet moving upward in his body, perforating his bowels. Ooh, that's never good. Startled by the noise of the guns, the horses bolted, and Fleshbein was knocked off the stagecoach as it sped away with the bleeding McArcher inside. Lying on the side of the road, Fleshbein begged for his life. Holshay leaned over him and said, quote, "If that fool had not shot, you would have not been hurt. I am sorry for you, but that's my business." He proceeded to rob him, then took off into the woods. 2 hours later, help would arrive and take the wounded man to the hospital in Bessemer. However, he had lost too much blood. The former Civil War drummer boy would die at 6 a.m. the following day, but not before he gave a description of his attacker. The cost of his life would be a gold watch, a pocketbook, a $10 gold coin, and a $5 bill. McArcher would be taken to the hospital in Minneapolis and would physically recover from his ordeal, but the other 2 men and the driver were not injured.
Okay, wait a minute. He had a pocketbook on him. So was he a cross-dresser? What kind of pocketbook we talking about? Was it a purse?
That's your language. Pocketbook. I know when I was reading before we did this, I'm like, she's going to pick up on that one.
He had a pocketbook? So he was a lady dresser? I'm not sure. I'm just asking. Because why was he holding a pocketbook? Was it literally a book in his pocket? Why would he steal a book? I have a lot of questions about this pocketbook detail.
I know you do. And I'm thinking back in the 1800s, it was probably like an elongated type of wallet, like a big, long, rectangular size wallet.
Yeah, like the thing that women carry nowadays that we call pocketbooks. Yeah, like a satchel to hold valuables in.
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
Right, because...
So here it is in a historic story, the word pocketbook.
See? Round robin.
Okay, just wanted to paint it out. That's all. Just being a wise ass. Okay, yeah.
Okay. All right, here we go. Bessemer Justice of the Peace, E.R. Swain, swore out a warrant for Holshay. A manhunt began. This would include the Ojibwa trackers, tracking dogs, and various law enforcement officers, including a postal inspector from both Michigan and Wisconsin. They managed to track him for 6 miles before they lost his trail in a stream. They set up a search grid, cutting off what they thought were his ways of escape, but unbeknownst to the men, Holshay had already headed east toward the iron mines of Marquette County. Newspapers carried a description of the wanted man along with listing the bounties for him. Everyone, and I mean everyone, knew who to look for. Now, reports vary on what happened next. The little town of Republic lies just west of Marquette, 120 miles from where he robbed and shot Fleischer. One story states that City Marshal Glode and Justice of the Peace E.E. Weiser were walking early in the morning towards the train depot when Glode noticed a disheveled young man looking like he was trying to avoid being noticed. As a lawman, he had received a description of Holshay 3 days earlier and recognized him. As the two men approached Holshay reached for his gun. Glode was faster, hit him with his billy club, incapacitating him, and hauled his ass off to jail. Another telling of his capture has William O'Brien and Albert Drake playing cribbage in the town's hotel. O'Brien was a former detective who now owned the hotel. Drake was a sharpshooter by trade. They heard the door open, and a hungry and exhausted man stumbled into the lobby. The man asked for a room, some food, and a pop. And that's soda for you, Christine. After eating, the man left to go to his room. O'Brien and Drake looked at each other, and O'Brien asked Drake if he knew the stranger. Drake had no idea who the stranger was, so O'Brien went behind the desk and got a wanted poster for Holshay. Both were sure it was the same man. O'Brien sent Drake to get Marshal Glode, Pat Whalen, the night marshal, and Justice Weiser. Once they had converged at the hotel, they decided to set up a trap for Holshay in the morning. Now, the story splits yet again. In later retellings, Drake would claim he went on the veranda with his gun while Glode and Whalen waited on the road. As Holshay left the hotel, the two men with Drake converging from above sandwiched the killer between them, throwing him to the ground, then taking him to the town hall. Glode's daughter would later claim that her father captured Holshay alone, tracking him as he kicked Weiser in the leg. Yet, another story would state that Glode recognized Holshay and lured him to the second floor of the hotel. Then, as Holshay descended the stairs to the first floor of the hotel, 3 men jumped him. However it happened, Holshay's reign of terror was over. When they initially captured him, the 22-year-old criminal refused to give his name. A search of his coat after he was arrested provided them with the evidence they needed to force a confession. A book with his name written on the inside, Fleshbane's pocketbook with his name and some papers in it, and his gold watch, and 2 other stolen watches were found. Holshay said, quote, "You got the right man. You did a good job. I only regret being taken in a little moss-back town like this." When asked about the robberies in Wisconsin and the robberies in Gojibek County, he replied, quote, "It is generally supposed one man has done them all, and I think that is so." They talk in riddles back then.
Yeah, a little bit. They were simpler.
Right. Now, what happened next is just bizarre. A message was sent to photographer William Whitesides, a prominent photographer in Ironwood. Whitesides came to Republic and pictures were taken. They took individual pictures of Holshay, dressing him like and posing him like a famous picture of Billy the Kid. I think that's who we were trying to think of when you were just talking about.
Yeah, probably. I couldn't think of the name, but yeah, Billy the Kid was one of them.
Yep.
They were trying to make their little local yokel famous felon.
Exactly. Right, so Billy the Kid was a Western outlaw of the time. They dressed him in a vest with cartridges and gave him empty guns to hold. Then they removed the props, put up a standard portrait background, and with Glode and Wayland dressed in their police uniforms, the 2 posed, one on each side of the killer, who sat in a chair. Sheriff Foley from Bessemer, along with stagecoach driver DeMuth, came to Republic to identify Holshay. Quote,
"That's him,"
stated DeMuth as he saw Holshay. "How are you, DeMuth?" After the photography session, Holshay was taken to Bessemer under heavy guard to await trial. His wrists would be handcuffed together with a chain attaching them to his feet. His trial would start on October 30th, and he would be found guilty of murder on November 16th. Upon conviction, he was sent back to Marquette to serve his life sentence. Now, Holshay was not a model prisoner. Are you surprised?
Well, I'm not surprised at all.
Not even a little bit.
No, I feel like that's his vibe, is to be a little bit on the outside of things, no matter where he is.
Yeah, exactly. Now, at one point, he managed to get a knife from the prison shoe factory, or he filed down a knife he stole from the mess hall that was sharpened in his cell, depending on the story. Now, refusing to leave his cell when the prisoners were called out, a guard was sent up to get him. The warden, wondering why the guard wasn't returning, went to investigate. Reaching his cell, he found the guard with his back pressed to Holshay's chest, the knife against his neck. Holshay was demanding his release in exchange for the guard's life. For 2 hours, the 2 stood at a stalemate, with the guard as an unwilling pawn between them. As he held the guard with his left hand, his right hand fell to his side, still holding the knife. The prison warden, seeing his chance, shot at Holshay, hitting him in the right hand, removing every finger. Holshay would also stage multiple hunger strikes, take another prisoner hostage, and attempted to escape multiple times. As his behavior became worse, he was transferred to the Ionia Reformatory for the criminally insane in Lower Michigan in November of 1893. Reports vary on what happened to him there. Prior to his incarceration, Holshay would claim that he had periodic blackouts and didn't remember what he did while blacked out. Convenient. He would have bouts of dizziness and suffer from seizures. Newspapers reported that while there, he underwent a brain operation to remove part of his skull and brain to repair a childhood injury. Reports of removal of bone pressing down on the brain were cited as the cause of his bad behavior. Later reports by physicians that examined him could find no evidence of any surgery. Holshay was returned to Marquette in July of 1894, and he was a changed man. Indulging in his love of reading, he became the prison librarian and editor of the prison newspaper. he learned to read and write French, and he became the prison mugshot photographer. He was, for all intents and purposes, now a model prisoner. The angry, rebellious youth of before was gone. He was replaced by a gentle, placid man. Warden James Russell petitioned Governor Fred Warner for his release. Governor Warner would commute his life sentence in 1910, and he was released for good on New Year's Day of 1913. On his first night out of prison, he went to Ivy Lake, lay in the snow, and stayed awake until the sunrise, wanting to see the sun come up. He changed his name after his release to Carl Paul. Working at various resorts around Marquette, he became a valuable, respected member of the community. He would work as a guide and photographer around Marquette and during the summers at the Huron Mountain Club. In 1917, he left for Yellowstone National Park, where he sold photos to tourists. In 1932, he was living alone in Florida, and in 1952, he committed suicide after suffering from a long illness. He was 86 years old. His robbery of the stagecoach in Gojibek County was the last recorded stagecoach robbery in Michigan and east of the Mississippi River.
Okay, but I want to know, how was he taking pictures as a photographer with no fingers on his right hand?
Oh.
Those cameras back in the day were really intricate, and that you had to push and pull them long. And you remember they had the whole pleated thing in the front, and you had to stand it up, and you had to like hold a flash bulb thing. So how was he doing this with no fingers?
Well, I mean,
my mind went to immediately.
That's a good question. But also, as I'm thinking about your description, because I do see those big, old-fashioned, big, bulky, heavy cameras, they were also on tripods.
Yeah.
So, listen.
How did he set it up with no fingers?
Well, only one hand didn't have fingers, so, he's got a nub that he can probably push and do. I went to school with a couple of people. One was a boy, one was a girl. They're both in my grade, which is unusual. And each of them were born with the defect where they were born without fingers. They could do a lot of shit, so who knows? Maybe he could have had some teeny tiny little nubs left, or if all the fingers were blasted off, I mean, you can get quite creative with, you can adapt.
I guess. Very true. It's just a disability, not a non-ability, I guess. But I don't know. That's all I could think of. Was like, how did this guy just go on living with a lobotomy and no fingers? I'm pretty sure he had a lobotomy.
Oh, I'm pretty damn sure he did too. They're like, yeah, no, we don't see anything here. All of a sudden he's
up through the nasal canal and punctured his frontal lobe. Just a little bit. Just a little frontal lobe stick.
Yeah. Tap, 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 tap. Oh, we got it. Isn't he docile?
Oh, man.
You remember when Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest? Did you ever see that?
Yeah. Oh, goodness.
Yep.
All right. But at least they stopped his tyranny. So I guess that's good. But why did he get out of prison? I don't understand.
I don't know, I guess, because they were like, you know what? This dude he is not going to commit one more crime.
Yeah, because he had a lobotomy and no fingers. They figured he couldn't shoot anybody.
I know. What's up with this dude being afraid of horses? That's interesting.
Well, karma. Didn't he shoot a couple in his time?
He did shoot a horse. Maybe that's why.
Yeah, gross.
He's like, I don't like horses. Maybe something bad happened to this dude with a horse when he was young. Maybe he got kicked in the frontal lobe. Maybe that's what made him so wacky.
Well, I can only hope. Oh, a brain injury.
Yeah.
Okay. Solves it again. He had a brain injury from a horse.
Oh, I mean, what else would explain his fear of horses?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I was just ending it with a
Ugh. So if you are listening to us on YouTube and enjoyed this story, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. We appreciate you taking the time out of your day to spend time with us. So thanks everyone for coming back and listening. As always, we so appreciate you. So have a great week, and we will see you all back on Wednesday for Round Robin. Have a great week, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.